Hi, welcome back to the Mom Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick, and co-host is Chris Lucian. And we are wrapping up the series on 7 habits of highly effective mobbers, where we're taking the habits in the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and reflecting on it and our experiences with product development, agile, and mobbing. And we're on the last habit, so sharpen the saw. And this might be the kind of the capstone of this whole thing. And what are your thoughts on it, Chris?
Well, it's funny, even when I first started working with Woody, even before we were mobbing, he would constantly quote "sharpen the saw," and bring it up regularly. So it was kind of a funny thing. But I think if you go think back to our episodes on the virtuous loop and the learning and retrospecting and creating action items, to me, I think that's like a team-based sharpening the saw, right? And certainly understanding like how do you do TDD better, and other things like that. The book kind of goes into like physical, social, emotional, and other things like that, like going on walks and things, or you know, just finding ways to renew, right? Getting good sleep even. Um, it can also be sharpening the saw because, as you're tired or exhausted and just continuing and working and working and working without getting any sleep, you'll eventually, just dull the blade, so to speak. And so, in order to sharpen the saw, to cut down more trees, you kind of constantly want to do this. And I think there are probably a lucky few out there that gets to do work and have hobbies that relate, that synergize, I guess, to go back to the synergy episode. Um, and so you can often sharpen the saw outside of the work environment as well. But for those that do not have that luxury, I think there's also this idea of making sure that you sharpen the saw for the work that you're doing regardless.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was just reading the Bob Martin book on the developer, what was it? The second book on the Clean Code series. Uh,
Clean coder.
Clean Coder, yes. And so in the middle of that, he kind of goes on a rant about the this idea that if you don't sharpen the saw during the workday, then you have to sharpen the saw outside of the workday and all this other stuff. He kind of said like being a professional requires this. So that was an interesting take on this topic as well. But for me, I think often I do try to pay attention to my skills in a specific area as well, and constantly be iterating on those. Um, and but also, family life or sleep or any of the other things to make sure that things are well-rounded, paying attention to where I can make improvements and then work to make those improvements. So I don't know. How about you?
Yeah, no, it's definitely right on. And um, I think it's kind of using the win-lose or win-win frame. If you don't sharpen the saw, you're basically setting up whatever thing it is, your whole life, the work item for the team, your organization, your system as a whole, your family or whatever. If you don't have sharpen the saw built in, I think it essentially sets up a win-lose scenario, kind of just like the analogy does itself, right? You have a saw to cut down trees. If it grows dull, you're winning because you're not stopping to sharpen, but you're losing in the long run because the dullness has a net effect of making you slower and being destructive than stopping and sharpening, right? And so I think it's a really counterintuitive but true principle in almost everything in life, including mobbing. And so the way I've seen it played out with mobbing is kind of we have our episodes on dedicated learning time. So that's a very direct way to apply this, right? To set aside time specifically each day in the work hours. So that would be the work hour version versus the outside of work hour version. And I've seen that be quite fruitful. I've also seen it happen ad hoc, right? So when you're in the context of a problem and maybe your current task is, you know, cut down trees 5 through 10 or whatever. I'm feeling like I'm making the Lorax very upset with this analogy, but let's
Yeah,
assume that we want to cut down trees and it's a good
Why?
thing.
Right.
um, and you're experiencing a dull blade, right? And you're just like kind of pounding on the side of the tree with a dull blade. Um, there is a time and place to, where the team is feeling the dullness to do it then and there, right?
Yeah,
And so that
absolutely.
dullness could be a literal tool. It could be someone is exhausted, right? Maybe something's going on in their work life, or something, just an experience we went through as a team, maybe an intense crisis or a meeting with someone else, where the way to sharpen the saw is to take a break or to investigate an automation right then and there, so that, tree 5 was terrible, but trees 6 through 7 are quite awesome, right? We feel
Yeah.
good about it.
No.
Um, and so I think it's good to be open to it in the scheduled fashion and also in the ad hoc fashion. I think both are good versions of sharpen the saw. Yeah, I don't know. Do any examples come to mind for you on that one, Chris?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are many. Even in the early days of mobbing, we were switching kind of from ASP.NET Forms to .NET MVC. Some of the team really got it, others didn't, and were kind of just following along. And so, I think Woody tends to talk about this a lot, which is the 12 days of index that we did, where it was like, redo the beginning of an app over and over and over again, and, basically throw it away, start over, throw it away, start over, that kind of deep, repetitive kata style learning. And then every time we went to build a new route in the MVC pattern afterwards, it was, we could have anybody navigate rather than just like one person navigate. And so it was generally, really obvious quality of life improvements from a mobbing perspective, especially when there's like a big skill diversity. It's like, let's stop and figure out how to level the skill level out. You're not going to download, 30 years of experience into one person all of a sudden, but you certainly can say, hey, we're going to just do some katas on the strategy pattern right now. And then we'll come back and implement it for real, and we'll, make sure the person that knows the most about it is not the one navigating. So you have the eye out, you have an eye out for where that improvement can happen. But just like you said with the ad hoc, you have the wherewithal to stop the line and bring the average skill level up and then start again.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a really powerful learning experience, and all of a sudden your team is much more valuable with or without you going forward. Or with or without the person, the key technical contributor in that scenario. So those sorts of things are really great, but that can be, you know, other ways to do these things too is like just collaborative things, or finding opportunities to interact with people you don't normally do, so you can establish relationships so that if you're working with them later, you already have a good relationship. Those sorts of things can be really powerful. And so you have like kind of the interpersonal saw, you have the technical saw, all these saws, they all need to be sharpened on some level. And so I think, yeah, the fact that they end up being different tools in the end does mean that you kind of have to like go through and make sure you spend a little time on each. So I don't know.
Nice, nice. No, I dig it. Yeah, and I think um, one kind of, it's like a good problem that I've seen with Sharpen the Saw is, especially if it's like a new team or you're working in a new stack, or there's something new and people are maybe nervous and kind of holding back a little bit. But I think continuous improvement and Sharpen the Saw, in my experience, often have this ketchup bottle effect, where it's kind of like, how can we get better? How can we improve our tools or the saw? And it's kind of like crickets. And then once you start doing stuff together, it's almost like the ketchup bottle is open and it's just like dumping all over the place, right? And so, and that's a really good problem. And I think I've seen some people get discouraged by it because it's just too much at once, right?
Yeah.
And so and some people get really excited, like, oh my gosh, I just saw this thing. Let's fix it now. And you're like, whoa, we're in the middle of doing this person's improvement, that they just brought
Yeah.
up, but you're like interrupting it to fix this other thing now, you know what I mean? And so it can get kind of chaotic. Um, and it can discourage people from, it's kind of that old adage, like, why do I say something? Because nothing's going to be done anyways. Or, like it can be discouraging to share an idea and then it not really get tried or not really get done, or someone else interrupts it and stops it from happening or something. And so I think just like you can kind of have chaos in a mob without a punch list or Kanban and work in progress of one with some tracking kind of thing, I think the same thing can happen with Sharpen the Saw, is that if you're having an explosion of ideas, that's great. Take a moment and write them all down in a punch list or Kanban cards or something, and then come back to them at the appropriate time. Because it's not always now, right? It maybe now is good, maybe now is not. And I think some people might be discouraged by that in the beginning. I think I saw it happen early in the week. Someone was really excited about an idea, but for us to do it, we would have had to break the flow of the thing we were working on and kind of have some context loss and rework. So we wrote it down. And then when we came back to it, they were really encouraged. You know what I mean? Like we came back to it, I think it was a couple hours or maybe a day later, like the next morning. And we did it, and they were really refreshed and excited that their Sharpen the Saw item was done. And that kind of helps. I think in the original mobbing book, Woody called it parking lot items, right? You got to have the parking lot
Yeah.
items. And Sharpen the Saw is great for parking lot items too. That
Hmm.
finish the current experiment, the current small card, and then you can come back to it at the right time. And
Even
prove. Oh, go
just
ahead. Yeah.
before this episode, we kind of went through that a little bit. Like we're gonna record, and then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, here's an improvement. And so maybe we should have parking lot the improvement, but we went ahead and did it right away. But like that's a good a good reason to choose to
Yeah.
do something like that or not.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
yeah, anyways, just
It did. The checklist improvement, it was a good time, so we did it.
yeah.
It wasn't destructive to what we were doing. Yeah, and maybe one more thing I'll share, because we might be getting close to time, is I think in kind of like classic writing and literature is talking about a well-ordered life. And so the ad hoc sharpen the saw is good, but not in a prescriptive sense, universal sense. But kind of a general observation is that people who seem to operate life or work with sharpened saws everywhere, what I've noticed is they will find the specific way to systematize sharpening the saw, like it talks about physically, mentally, spiritually, socially, emotionally, by being open to the ad hoc sharpen the saw, but also being like, okay, where in my schedule is sharpening the saw, with my tech skills, or sharpening my saw with the crafter skills, or physical or social, emotional, and having systems built in. And this kind of gets into habits, having cues and things to promote that you are sharpening kind of all the time, little by little, um, as opposed to, so I guess making the diet and exercise example, if you have a daily habit to have moderate exercise, you're never in the state where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really out of shape and I need to go run
Yeah.
50 miles right now or something, right? So, um,
And if you're constantly refactoring, then you're not in the state of I can't make a change anymore. I'm gonna lose
yes.
my hair, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you're constantly in the state of learning and improving mentally, or learning and improving technically, you know what I mean, then it's, I think I'm reading The Power of Habit. I'm kind of reading the habit books backwards, like from the newer one, I'm going back to the older ones. It was talking about a keystone habit, and it was this idea that once you prove the ability to manipulate your habits in one area, like maybe it's just physical or one of these other areas, it's like the beachhead for all the other ways to systematize habit change and sharpening of the saw. And so maybe that's the takeaway, is find your keystone, sharpen the saw, and then once you got that going, how can you extend that class, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, in the book, he in the Seven Habits book, he talks a lot about going on walks and then walking with his wife, and then, basically connecting on an emotional level during the walks much more solidly, right?
Yep.
And then also in the Bob Martin book, The Clean Coder, he talks about, taking a little bit of time after work each day to improve your skills, and refers to, keeping yourself marketable. And just because you work in one language, you want to probably sharpen the saw in another programming language, those sorts of things
Yep.
as well. But I think in both of those cases, it was taking, deliberate time, to then go away and then, do the deliberate practice or deliberate sharpening of the saw. And I think it is very different when it is a regular interval or a habit. And then, the keystone habit, and I think specifically habit stacking, so I'd have a really hard time remembering to take my vitamins, but when I put my vitamins next to my espresso machine, I never forget. And then similar things with like, working out and then like kind of switching my mindset from, the work day to like, home life or something. There's all kinds of things that you can do to basically create a link between all those processes to like shift from one mental state to another, or continue, working on things. And so, yeah, so I totally agree with it. It's just like finding those things to like help develop and move forward, can keep, your whole, I guess, being in general, able to adapt to a lot of different things as they come at you in life, right?
Yep. Yeah, totally. Totally. Absolutely. And the whole habit stacking is funny to me because I don't know if it was my keystone habit, but um, writing a sticky and putting it somewhere, um, and then actually doing it was maybe a foundational or keystone habit. And then literally I have stacks of stickies
Yeah,
that stack on top of each other.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, but yeah, it's like once you find that leverage point, yeah, that can really help a lot. So,
Like
cool.
I have a personal Kanban in Trello, but it's only like it only really works for work. But then I realized like around the house having like a checklist on a door from like Checklist Manifesto or something. And so I
Yes.
have like on the back of my front door, I have like this checklist. It's like, okay, did you do all these things? And yeah, it generally keeps anything from any one thing from piling up. But
Sure.
it does have to be somewhere where you like go and look, or you can stack the habit. It's something that you're going to go do anyway, you're
Yeah.
consistent on, but then it leads into all these things that you're not consistent on. I love that idea and I use it all the time.
Yeah. And I think maybe the last piece, and maybe it's my lack of understanding, but I don't know how to put it any other way other than I think to follow through with Sharpen the Saw, it really has to be up there in your priorities, like your real beliefs, your real emotions,
Hmm.
because if I have a sticky that says, I don't know, run for 10 minutes or something, but I really don't care about running and really don't care about exercise, that tool is not going to help me a whole lot, right? And
Yeah.
so, um, really, I forget which book it was. It's been said a lot throughout time, but I think it was said in the Crucial Conversations book, if I remember right. It was something like, if you really know a thing, you'll do it. Where if you're not doing it, you don't really know it, kind of thing. And so,
Sure.
so when it comes to sharpen the saw, there is this kind of will exertion, but also being thoroughly soaked in the good things such that you really want to do it.
Well,
And like not, and I guess the last thing I was saying real quick was
yeah,
like there are times where I'm like, I know I should do my 10 minutes of running or 10 minutes of reading or something, and I don't want to do it, but I'm gonna do it anyways, because that's like what I am. That's what I do. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Kind of that identity thing, maybe a little bit. Yeah, that was
Well,
the last thing I
and
thought.
the identity thing I think came from the Atomic Habits book, where he was talking
Right.
about if you
Yeah.
view yourself as an author, it's not whether or not you've released a book, it's that you write every day. And often doing the 10 minutes will lead to hours if you get excited about it. And so
Yeah.
it is crucial that you begin, do your 10 minutes, and then if you're still not feeling it, great, just stop there. But sometimes you'll get super motivated and then and then keep going. And so like a good example of this for me is I like to study languages, and so I'll do language practice, and it's just a different language. And each time, sometimes I get really excited about it, and then I'll go and listen, more to music about, in that language when I go and do the next thing that I'm going to go do. But sometimes the motivation's not totally there, or I get really tired from it. And so, yeah, that might be a good example.
Yep. Awesome. Love it. Cool, cool, cool. Well, we are at time, but
Yeah.
that rounds out the series. This book was super inspiring for me and kind of co-located a lot of things that I've seen in a lot of different areas, maybe all throughout time, but it puts it all together and packs it together quite nicely, these 7 habits or principles. And yeah, find a lot of value in them. And thanks for hearing us share about them. Please like and subscribe. Please share your thoughts on how you've seen these principles or habits be effective, or maybe how they haven't. We're open to challenges there, and I love to hear your experiences on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and more. And until next time, mob on and have a good one, everybody. See ya.
Keep those habits.